again, Corey and I didn't do one last week because we thought it would be too staged, and so we decided to just go straight into the episode. There's a lot of pressure now when you're like, let's do an unscripted cold open. I'm like, I've forgotten every word of the English language.
Or is that the cold open right there?
Yeah, the cold open is Jay doesn't know how to talk.
You're from the
I just feel like you have to be funny now.
Right. I'm funny, but not on command. I'm only funny accidentally and when it's actively detrimental to the situation. Hello, and welcome to episode 25 of Calder's Calling, the Calder Times flagship podcast and your premier podcast destination for everything surrounding the American Hockey League. My name is Jay Foster. I'm joined today by Deana Weinheimer and Corey Swartz. We've got a full house here at Calder's Calling, which is very exciting. Before we kick things off, if you aren't already subscribed to us on your favorite podcast platform or on YouTube, go ahead and do that now. If you're currently watching on YouTube, feel free to like, share, leave a comment, or hit the little bell button down below so you can get every episode delivered straight into your notifications. I'd also like to thank our show sponsor, Document Doctors. While not on the ice, they can help you and your business optimize and increase your revenue and profits to a bigger slice. Check out documentdoctorsllc.com, and don't forget to mention that the Calder Times sent you to them. We're going to do something a little bit different this week because it's playoffs, and that means instead of doing our usual section, which is quick hits, where we talk about, what happened around the league and everything, we're just going to round up. I've called it the first round roundup, which I thought was... which I enjoyed saying. I don't know how people feel about that, but we're just going to run through a couple of the series, the ones that Corey and I previewed last week. We're going to talk about some storylines from them, some MVPs from them, and then we'll move on to picking our 3 official stars of round 1. So I guess let's start off with, ironically, the series that wrapped up the most recently in Belleville and Toronto, which went to overtime 2 games in a row. And had some fireworks, shall we say? Deana, how did you think that Belleville Toronto went? Was it about what you expected? Was it more? Was it less? What's your immediate takeaway from the Senators and the Marlies trying to murder each other for 3 games?
So the series went kind of how I expected it to go. The literal end of the series is not how I expected it to go. I think we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a bit. But overall, yeah, I was expecting Belleville to take it in 3 games. But ultimately, Belleville's experience in playing games that matter and just clawing and scratching their way into the playoffs ultimately won out over Toronto, who had been really struggling and just didn't get anything together. I mean, ultimately they showed some flashes of being able to stage comebacks and string a few goals together, but ultimately they could not put together a full 60-minute game. And at times, I've said this multiple times already, but they looked disinterested. They didn't want to, it didn't seem like they wanted to be there, which sounds crazy to say that they don't want to be in the playoffs, but just the way that the whole team was out there skating, it was pretty discouraging to see, but ultimately Belleville came out on top like I expected them to. So
yeah, it would have been nicer for Cleveland specifically if Toronto had pulled it out, but we talked about this a little bit on Monday's episode of Locked On Blue Jackets, if I could cross promote for just a second, which is your daily podcast choice for all Columbus Blue Jackets things. But Toronto failed the punk test. Belleville bullied them. I think they got in their heads. I think we saw that based on the handshake line drama, and I think Belleville did what Ottawa hockey teams have been doing to Toronto hockey teams since the beginning of time, and that is winding them up until they're foaming at the mouth and they make stupid mistakes about it.
Yeah, and the funny thing is that there were times that Toronto tried to be the physical team, especially early on in Game 3. They tried to be overtly physical, try to get in Belleville's heads a little bit, but Belleville didn't budge. I mean, honestly, watching that first period of Game 3, Belleville held themselves back. They're like, you know what? We know Toronto's going to try to push, especially in the second period. We're going to hold that energy back, conserve that, and be ready for when they do. Toronto came up, had that surge. Guess what? Belleville was able to respond. Yeah, it went into overtime, but there we go. But yeah, that handshake line, it's unlike, like I said in the tweet that I'm going to bring up here, it was truly unlike anything I had ever seen in my life when it comes to the handshake line.
Yeah. And I see a lot of people being like, well, Kyle Clifford wouldn't react like that. There must be a reason. And I'm like, yeah, Imama obviously said something to him.
Mm-hmm.
You're an adult. Like,
but also, like, if you have not watched the North Division, the rivalry between Laval, Toronto, and Belleville, it's tense. This year especially has been overtly tense. And so on the Toronto play-by-play, their announcer, I can't recall his name right now, I'm sorry, did mention that the league might, or the team might have, or might be considering reaching out to the American Hockey League about some alleged comments from Boko Imama in Game 2. I did reach out to the American Hockey League, and they stated that they had not heard from Toronto about anything like that. So, but obviously something was said. But
which, like, again, that's hockey.
Yep.
So much of hockey is chirping, and like, you know that you're going to get chirped. You just lost the series in overtime. Just be an adult about it. Like, let it wash off. Let it roll over you. You know? How are you, however damn old Kyle Clifford is, you have 2 Stanley Cups, and you're still, like, reacting to someone who is saying something explicitly designed to wind you up? You know? We could spend all episode talking about the Imama Clifford thing, and we're not going to. But it felt right that was how the series ended, with some kind of attempted mugging in the handshake line. Corey, I want to talk to you about Charlotte and Hartford, which wrapped up as Hartford took the shocking victory over Charlotte. I know we talked about last week how we couldn't see a way that Hartford won this series, but they did. They're going to be facing the Providence Bruins in the second round, which we'll talk about. Maybe will we talk about it? No, Taps will talk about it later. So check out Taps if you want to talk about that. How do you think that series went? How are you feeling about how the Atlantic Division is shaking out now that we've got our final 4 of the Atlantic?
I will go so far as to call that probably one of the biggest upsets of the first round, in my opinion. I mean, this game is Charlotte, or the series, I should say, Charlotte's for the taking. They took Game 1. You know, they have all 3 games at home. You know, after Game 1, especially, you kind of said to yourself, like, okay, this is going exactly how we suspected it was going to play out. But I'll just be a straight shooter with this one. Charlotte got Game 3 big time by Dylan Garand. Turned in a 38 save performance in a 3-1 win. And this is a game where, again, Grant stood on his head. He didn't allow a goal until, Hartford was able to build a 3-0 lead. Shorthanded goal by Brett Berard was probably the dagger as far as I'm concerned to go up 3-0. Really goes to show you, I think, is a great demonstration of the perils of a 3-game series. Hartford's able to kind of eke out a win in overtime in Game 2. That kind of changes the complexion a little bit. But, again, you can't discount that Charlotte gave a really good effort and, I think laid a lot on the table in a sense in Game 3 where they just ran into a goalie who was on fire. And, again, we talked last week about how we didn't see a way for Hartford to win without Louis Domingue, since he was called up to the New York Rangers and, from what I can tell, will remain up with New York Rangers for the foreseeable future. It's really Dylan Garand's crease to lose at this point. So I do think that, in terms of drama, in terms of the upset, the Hartford series definitely delivered in a big way to kind of, give a good upset. I mean, we had two really big upsets in the Atlantic Division in the play-in round, and then the higher seeded third and fourth teams were both knocked out, and kind of in shocking fashion by these upstart lower seeds in two different, impressive ways. And so we're going to talk a little bit about the next round in a little bit here, but I think it builds into a lot of intrigue for the Atlantic Division race to see if these two teams are for real, if they just got lucky in a 3-game series.
Yeah, for sure. And I want to give a shout out to Dylan Garand as well, who, again, not to keep referencing back to last week, but we talked about how Spencer Knight wins that goaltending battle every day and twice on Sundays, Dylan Garand faced more shots in that first round than any other goalie. He faced 111 shots over 3 games. And like you said, I thought he was excellent in game 3 when he needed to be. Spencer Knight wasn't poor by any stretch of the imagination, but sometimes a goalie has a game. And I think that game 3 was Dylan Garand's game. But I agree with what you said. It's going to be interesting to see the Atlantic Division. Obviously, like you said, both of those teams were the upsets, with Lehigh Valley beating Wilkes-Barre Scranton, Hartford beating Charlotte. It's going to be interesting to see how they hold their own against teams like Hershey and Providence, who are, the big boys of the Atlantic Division. It's going to be fun. I think the Atlantic is the most interesting second round because of those upsets, and I'm really interested to see what happens from there. And I want to go from talking about one goalie to another goalie, which is good Lord Dustin Wolf. And I'm going to talk about Dustin Wolf a little bit later on in our 3 stars. Spoiler alert. Dustin Wolf had a 46 save shutout in game 1 against the Tucson Roadrunners, and then followed that up with a 40 save performance in game 2 to allow 3 goals on 86 shots. Or 89 shots, excuse me. He made 86 saves on 89 shots over 2 rounds. Calgary was the lower seed coming in. Again, massive upset there. And we talked about it last week, Corey. Like, the head probably says that Tucson wins this series, but the heart finds it so difficult to bet against a guy like Dustin Wolf. And I think he proved that there's a reason we read off his list of accolades from last season. There's a reason he was the reigning MVP and goalie of the season last year. All 5'11" of him is just such a gamer. And again, we'll talk a little bit about who Calgary is. Oh, we won't. That'll be on taps again. But Calgary's next round matchup is Coachella Valley, I believe. That's going to be, again, fascinating, because on paper, Coachella Valley should tear Calgary into teeny tiny pieces. But how do you bet against a guy like Wolf?
He gives him a chance to win. And we said it before that, or at least I think we both agreed on it, that we've never seen Dustin Wolf turn in a bad playoff season where he's not given his team a chance to win in his young career still. And, how this guy's not an NHL staple yet is beyond me. That needs to be changing here at some point very soon for the Calgary Flames, who could just absolutely use it. But, again, it's kind of the same thing. It's a funny parallel between the Atlantic and the Pacific in that, you have this lowest seeded team kind of pull off this upset. Now they're facing, as you said, the big boys who on paper should absolutely decimate them. So we do have a lot of really intriguing things. We've seen some upsets in the first round, but will that carry over into the second round is now the question, which I think is a fascinating one to answer.
Yeah, it's going to be really fun. Just one more stat on Dustin Wolf. In his 3 years in the AHL, in the playoffs, he is 15-9. Of those 15 wins, 5 of them are shutouts, and he has a .927 save percentage. In terms of what's going, this is an AHL podcast and not an NHL podcast, obviously, so I don't want to get too into the ins and outs of the Calgary Flames goaltending situation, but you've got to think that Dustin Wolf is one of their top goalies next season. Whether Markstrom stays or not, Dustin Wolf is one of those guys. He's NHL ready, I think, and you've got to honor that. He wasn't great in limited action this season, but neither were any of the Calgary Flames. So, like, what are you going to do about it? I really, really want Dustin Wolf to succeed. And yeah, like, we aren't going to be previewing the Calgary Coachella Valley game, but if we were, Calgary in 5, just because of Dustin Wolf.
Agreed. Easy.
Like, that's
Easy. Playoff Dustin Wolf is a whole other animal. Not to
right. Again,
do a pun, but
how do you bet against him? You don't. It's you know, it's like I don't want to compare him to Carey Price because people will get insane about that. But it's, you know, in Carey Price's prime, how do you bet against that?
But as soon as you said Carey Price, my mind just went back and I went like this because, you know, you
Oh,
said
when
it's
the
a
Bears
very
got Carey
apt
Price.
comparison. 2007, the Bears got Carey Priced in the Calder Cup
happen to
Finals in
anyone.
5 games. So I mean, like, you know, it's a very, very valid comparison, I think. And this is a guy that, you know, he just stole that series in the first round. You know, I don't think Calgary's hopefully too decimated compared to last season, but like total different. I don't want to take away from this discussion in our 3 stars, but like that is a really great comparison in my book.
If they get anything close to Carey Price out of Dustin Wolf, like, the Flames have done a crime here. They've done a robbery. We're going to talk about one more goaltender. We're going to move on to the Ontario Bakersfield matchup, which I think probably the most expected of all of these 4 matchups. I wasn't really expecting Bakersfield to do much of anything. I guess, yeah, it's kind of the opposite of the Charlotte-Hartford series, where Ontario just kind of strolled their way into the second round. Bakersfield put up basically no fight at all. Got outscored 10-2, I believe. Got outscored 5-0 at even strength. And that was without Ontario's stars doing anything. Like, TJ Tynan had 1 assist. Samuel Fagemo had 1 assist. You know, this is a dude that had 43 goals in the regular season, and he didn't turn up on the score sheet apart from like a secondary assist. You know, guy like Tyler Madden has 3 goals, both of them, including both game winners. Eric Portillo, who is a rookie, had the second best save percentage in the first round. He was like, I think 0.1% behind Dustin Wolf. You know, he was excellent. I feel kind of bad for Bakersfield, but they, similar to Toronto, they just didn't really put up a fight even a little bit.
Nope.
And that's unfortunate. Except for, I will give Olivier Rodrigue credit, who was excellent in game 2. However, Jack Campbell in game 1 was less than excellent, and that really kind of sunk them, I think.
Yeah, we kind of called that a wild card, didn't we? Where we were kind of, you know, teasing about, not teasing, but, you know, saying about Jack Campbell kind of, you know, being the highest paid goaltender in the AHL, and, you know, that kind of being, you know, unfortunately that reputation kind of carries. So it's one of those things I feel like we were pretty spot on in some of our analysis of some of the key factors in this series last week.
Yeah, they needed Jack Campbell to be special, and he wasn't. And ultimately, I think that was the difference maker. Deana, you had a thought, I think.
No, I was just gonna say that I didn't even realize Jack Campbell was still in the American Hockey League until I started watching that series. And
you're like, oh, hey, that guy.
Yeah, like, oh, I remember talking about it when he first got sent down. Oh my gosh, he's still in there. Oh my gosh, they didn't make it out of the series.
So in fairness to Campbell,
wow.
he had a rough start to the regular season. He kind of flattened out. He finished with a 918 save percentage on the regular season, I believe. So like, it was a fair choice to go with. Both of their goalies were basically even going into the series. I think they had a 918, and then Rodrigue had, I think, a 916 going into the series. So like, starting Campbell, the veteran with experience, I think was a fair choice. But I wonder in hindsight if they are kicking themselves a little bit just because.
Just a tad.
Just a little bit, you know. I'm pleased that Ontario made it through, and I'm even more pleased. Again, we'll talk about this going on in a minute here, but I'm even more pleased that they don't have to face the Colorado Eagles in the second round, because the Colorado Eagles have ended Ontario's season in the postseason 3 years running. So now I'm wondering if, now that they don't have to get through the Eagles, what's their chances of going all of the way? But we'll talk about that in a second. Does anyone have any more thoughts on any of the first round games before we move on here?
I think we summed it up pretty well.
Cool. Let's talk about some stars. Corey, this is almost a homer pick from you, which I guess again is I talked about this in our group chat. I'm gonna make a bingo card for Calder's Calling, and 4 of the boxes are going to be Corey picks a Hershey Bear as his star of the week or player to watch. You did not pick a Hershey Bear because they haven't played yet. However, you got about as close as it's possible to get. Who is your star of the week, Corey? Or star of round 1?
This is my music playing in the background. I feel like on this lead up here, but I picked Garrett Pilon from the Belleville Senators because, of course, I would. Scored perhaps his second biggest goal of his career to lift the Belleville Senators to a series win in overtime. We were talking about the fireworks that happened after Garrett Pilon's goal in overtime. Bore an eerie resemblance to his Game 5 overtime goal in the Calder Cup Finals, which, of course, is pretty much eternal lore for me at this point. I will always be thinking of that goal just at will, like Mike Vecchione's goal in Game 7. But, Pilon absolutely, just right place, the right time. I mean, it was really easy, guys. I was looking at the stats, just to see if there's any, to see who my pick should be. And Pilon's at the top of the scoring list with 3 goals and 1 assist in 4 games, had a 2-goal game in Game 2, I believe, of that series. So, there you see it, just this clip here. It's fantastic. Pilon just kind of right place, right time for the shot. He knows how to bury those. Just absolutely awesome if you're watching on YouTube here. Just kind of finds them all alone in the slot, and he just, wraps it past the goaltender there. Just almost the same corner, from the camera angle there as his goal, last spring, same spot where the celebration takes place at. It's eerie. It's really eerie, and it's awesome. I absolutely love it. Very happy for him. I said it on Twitter after seeing that. Miss him a lot in Hershey. But, of course, I will always be happy to see him having success. And I hope he makes it to the NHL at some point here, too. He's absolutely deserved it in my book.
What a read on that puck. I mean, it was just a slight rebound. Yeah, a slight rebound, and he got it. But can we just appreciate the celly here with the whole team jumping around like little bunny rabbits? That I don't know. It's hockey players are small baby animals. Prove me wrong.
Yes, correct. There's only 3 types of hockey player, and it is large dog, orange cat, and baby bird. Those are the only 3 types of hockey player.
And they all orange cat is a great one brain cell animal meme on Reddit.
Exactly.
And
yes, so
I love it.
I love them all dearly. Some of my favorite hockey players are orange cats. Some of my favorite people are. I am also in that orange cat category. In that, I made coffee the other day and then found it 12 hours later because I made it and then forgot about it. So, I get it. I am also extremely stupid and bad at things, but I love an orange cat hockey player. Dustin Wolf is, no spoilers. I'm just going to get right into it. My star of the week is Dustin Wolf. I alluded to that earlier. He's not an orange cat. He does have red hair, but I have to go back to, his performance in this series is the game changer. He's the MVP of the first round for me, and it's not particularly close. 46 save shutout in Game 1 against Tucson, who were the 2nd seed. Dylan Genther had, I think, 11. Dylan Genther, I believe, had 14 shots on goal over those 2 games and didn't score. There's just... I feel bad that I said all my Dustin Wolf stuff in the first bit because I can't really just regurgitate it all here, but I'm just... Every single time I think that he's hit his peak, he hits another level, Here's another great save if you're watching this on YouTube. If it's the save I'm thinking of, yeah. Kid's 5'11". There is no reason for him. I think this is a really good example of, and I'm sorry to sorry to Dennis Hildeby for catching strays here, but there is a point at which you are too big to be an effective goalie. And I think 6'8" is kind of at that reach, because if you watched him play, I think he was good for the first 2 games against Belleville. I think he had a very poor game for game 3 for Toronto, and his gap control was not great. His post control was not great. When you're that big, you just open up all these holes everywhere because your limbs are so long. Dustin Wolf is a fantastic example of a goalie who his positioning is note perfect, and it has to be, because he's not big enough to cover the net just by existing. He has to be better than every other goalie in terms of positioning and in terms of reflex. And I think that's what you see with a guy like Dustin Wolf. And he's just a really, really fun goalie to watch. Deana, I believe we're going back to the East for your star.
Not just back to the East, but back to Belleville. So Corey had Garrett Pilon. I mean, just to kind of add on that, that's why they brought him in. That exact type of play right there. So Corey with a great pick. But I'm going to go with Donovan Sabrango. So Donovan is getting his very first postseason action here in this series. I'm going to bring up another clip here on YouTube. And basically, this tweet says it all. Donovan Sabrango getting his first ever Calder Cup playoff goal in only his second pro playoff game. Now, this was unfortunately for Donovan, they didn't win this game, but for the first 2 games on the series, he gets game 1, his first pro playoff point. Game 2 gets that playoff goal. So he's kind of been around a little bit. He was with the Detroit organization, and things didn't work out, and then he found himself over in the Ottawa Senators organization. So great job to that young man. I know it's been a process for him, and 2 points in 3 games, not too shabby.
He's going to be a problem for Cleveland.
Oh, big problem. I would not be surprised if they pair him up to go against Roman Ashan's line. Very similar players. Feisty, can still, get some scoring in there, but that's a matchup I'm looking forward to covering, not gonna lie. But we'll talk more about that later.
Yes. In fact, let's talk more about that now. We're gonna move on from our stars. And I was gonna do Hershey and Lehigh Valley first, but I think actually what we're gonna do is Cleveland and Belleville, because it's topical, quite frankly. Cleveland hasn't played in the postseason yet. Belleville, obviously, they just went 3 games. Their series starts on Wednesday, I believe, in Ottawa. Deana, you are the expert here, so I would like you to take us away in terms of what we should expect from the Cleveland-Belleville matchup.
So this matchup is going to be very fascinating. So I don't even know where to begin. I guess I'll start with the schedule, because there were some people that were very confused about this schedule because, hey, Cleveland took the division. They're supposed to have home ice advantage, right? Well, it doesn't always necessarily mean that you get the first game. In Cleveland's case, they had the opportunity to choose, because of how the travel schedule and limitations work in the playoffs, Belleville's far enough that they can't do, say, like a 2-2-1 or, flopping back and forth. So the league told Cleveland, well, do you want to have the first 2 games at home, or do you want the last 3 games at home? You have that decision. Cleveland decided to do the latter. They wanted every potential series clinching game to happen inside of the Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse. Another thing to remember, even though a schedule has been put out for this game, the 3 games in Cleveland are not actually set in stone. For those that don't know, the Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse, where the Cleveland Monsters play, is actually shared with the Cleveland Cavaliers of the NBA, who are also in the postseason. So they have to wait until the NBA second round schedule is out, and then they can finally get that scheduled. So the big storyline with Cleveland is they have been just sitting, not necessarily sitting idly, like they're not in action. They are practicing, needless to say, but they're just sitting there. They're just waiting. And Trent Vogelhuber told the AHL.com that a lot of them are just excited to just play. They have to take a special mindset with it. And then just, continuing to communicate expectations from the individuals as far as the roles go and the groups, and that it's really a different challenge having this first series bye. And then there's also on the Cleveland side, there's some talk about, now that they're finally healthy, they do have a lot of healthy scratch potential. Also, they brought in a new player in Luca Pinelli. He was a 4th round pick by the Blue Jackets in 2023, scoring 48 goals for Ottawa in the OHL this season. So that's a huge offensive help, but he's saying, the lineup's not locked in stone. So it's going to have to be a lot of decisions, as what the coaching staff feels gives the group the best chance to win. Basically, his message right now, nothing is given this time of year. So you constantly have to work and be a team player at that. So that's kind of the news from the Cleveland side. Belleville, like we just talked about, they just had a nice series win against the Toronto Marlies. Going back to Corey's star, Garrett Pilon is currently leading Belleville in postseason points with 4. Some other names to kind of watch on their side. Josh Curie has 3 points. Wyatt Bongiovanni has 3 points. Same thing with Jacob Larson. Looking in goal, they have been riding Mads Sogard here over the first 3 games, where he has had 8 goals against on I can't do math right now. He's put in 59 saves, has 8 goals against across 3 the 3 games played. So the big thing for Cleveland, who sometimes has struggled as of late to get shots up, literally throw anything and everything on the net. The Belleville defense has done a really great job this postseason in limiting shots. So Cleveland will just have to find a way to mitigate that, get their strong forwards. I'm looking at you, Josh Dunn, to create space for the natural-born scorers to go out there and just lob tons of shots on goal. Jet Greaves on the other side with Cleveland. What more can I say about him that we haven't already said? He has been the story of Cleveland this season, other than Trey Fix-Wolanski. I know. I constantly talk about him because he is him. But yeah, Jet Greaves is going to have to be Cleveland's best player if they want to get past this literally never say die Belleville squad.
Yeah, it's for my money, this is the most entertaining series that we're going to be that we're going to be covering. I think the combination of honestly, if I'm being brutally honest, the combination of like the emotional investment in the Cleveland Monsters and their skill, the season they've had, the causing problems on purpose energy that Belleville is bringing to this series. And I mean that as like an affectionate thing. Sometimes I say that on Twitter and people get mad at me about it. Like, that's an affectionate thing. I promise. I'm saying it with love. I think it's going to be a really interesting, physical, hard-fought series. I do think, I haven't checked, I do think it is going to feature the goalie tandem with the biggest size difference, with 6 foot tall Jet Greaves and Mads Sogard, who they affectionately call the Great Dane. Because again, I feel like he is 6'7", 6'8", which is frankly too tall. So I don't know how tall the goalie situation in Coachella Valley is, but I suspect it's not literally 6'7". So I think it's going to be tall versus small in goal for Cleveland and Belleville, which I do enjoy. Let's do some predictions. How many games does this series go to, and who wins? Let's start with you, Deana, and then we'll go to Corey.
Belleville has been so, I use the term pesky all the time, but that is what they are. They are that gnat that will not go away. If Jet Greaves is Jet Greaves, this thing is done in 4. If he falters at all in the defense, lets Belleville run all over Cleveland, this thing could easily, well, sorry, I'll go back to that. It would be 3 if Jet Greaves is Jet Greaves. If Jet Greaves isn't Jet Greaves because of the time off, this could easily go 5.
Yeah, I agree. Corey, how do you feel about this series?
I'm going to say it's going to be Cleveland in 4. And the reason for that is that, I think it's going to be a close series. I think there'll be a couple of close games. But let's not kid ourselves here. Toronto, Cleveland is in a different echelon than Toronto was as an opponent. And Toronto was able to steal a win off this series and force overtime, at least go to overtime in this one. I know that, Belleville's coming in flying high and they'll have momentum. I think that's kind of a key recurring theme of these teams that won in the play-in round is that there's momentum and, a whole heck of a lot of belief amongst these teams that won. But Cleveland finished where they are for a reason. They have their players back. They're reinforced. We're not talking about the injured Cleveland. We're talking about the full power Cleveland now. I think there will be times where we'll say, ooh, this is getting interesting. But ultimately, I think that Cleveland's going to take it in 4.
I agree. And we talked about this on Locked On Blue Jackets on Monday as well, in that I think the Monsters take this in 4. I think Belleville tries, but I think Cleveland just has the edge.
I don't want to be too optimistic. I mean, I'm also trying to figure in, okay, they've been down, but also I went back and watched a few more clips, kind of the highlights of that first round series. And there were so many times that it looked like Belleville was just holding back just because Toronto was. So I don't even know if we've seen what a playoff team Belleville truly can be.
It's very fair.
Good point. It's going to be interesting. Let's move on to the other team, the other series in the East that we're going to preview. And this is, I assume, where Corey talks for 47 minutes straight. So Lehigh Valley wins in an upset, a possibly even more shocking upset than the Calgary-Tucson one, beating, they beat Wilkes-Barre Scranton in 2 games, correct? Or did it go to 3? No, they beat them in 2 games.
Just 2.
Yeah. They're going to face
in overtime.
Hershey. That's what a reward for beating your state rivals, for coming in as the 6th seed in the division, sneaking into the playoffs at the last minute, and you are rewarded for all of that with, here you go, here's the best regular season AHL team almost of all time.
And a reinforced Bears team, because before we recorded this or started recording this, the Bears officially received 7 players back from the Washington Capitals. Most officially, it's officially 7, but it's mostly 6. That includes 4 defensemen: Hardy Hamanaktel, Dylan McElrath, Lucas Johansson, and Vincent Iorio. Iorio might not play to start the series. He took that pretty nasty hit early on in the Rangers series in Washington, where he was skating in a non-contact jersey. It's kind of iffy on his status at this point. But up front, they also get Hendrix Lapierre, who just had his big first. I don't know if you guys saw last night his first Stanley Cup playoff goal. It was a beauty,
It was a pretty good one,
an absolute beauty. As well as Ivan Miroshnichenko. That's a huge add. Those are 2 offensively potent guys, as well as a center. So the Bears are back to 100%. Which adds to their credence here. Lehigh Valley's no slouches either. They got a bevy of players from the Philadelphia Flyers once their season ended. They had for the Lehigh Valley or the Wilkes-Barre series, I should say. Most of those players chipped in points. Bobby Brink had believe it was changed to an assist, but it could have easily been a goal. Adam Ginning had some points. All 4, I believe it was 4 players, and I'm blanking on who all of them they were, but regardless, all of them chipped in points. I was doing the math on that earlier when I was writing my preview for this series. Earlier on, they've been probably one of the peskiest teams. It kind of reminds me a little bit of what we were talking about with Belleville, as well as, Calgary in some ways. The Lehigh Valley is a very pesky team. And I think it's just how the Bears will counter that. There's been a lot of times. The one thing I noticed in the Lehigh series is that the Phantoms just love to get the puck into the blue paint or near the blue paint and just throw all their bodies at the net and dig away. And, it really confounded Wilkes-Barre, whether it didn't always result in goals, but it was just an energy sapping, kind of style that they were playing on Wilkes-Barre, where the Penguins never really got going. All the Penguins players that came down from Pittsburgh were really good, but the rest of the team, they looked lost in some ways. It didn't look like the same Wilkes-Barre Scranton team that won 7 straight games, I believe was their number in the late stages of the regular season. They, again, victimized by a short series in some ways by, you had one kind of game where they won 2-1. Didn't look bad, but they just didn't look like themselves. Kind of had an game, obviously massively choked a 3-1 lead in game 2 to, allow the Phantoms to tie it 2 different times there, blowing leads of 3-1 and 4-3 to get to overtime. And then, overtime, a perfect play, a perfect defensive breakdown cost Wilkes-Barre that series. But, for the Phantoms, they've been kind of resilient, a little bit of a closer tail of the tape with Hershey in the regular season series. They play each other 12 times. Hershey went 8-2, 0-2. But 5 of those 12 games were decided either beyond regulation or by a single goal. So there were 4 overtime games. Lehigh Valley actually had 2 shootout wins. Hershey had 2 overtime decisions. Closer games, I think they get credit for in this one. But, they're very familiar with each other. I think it's going to be a pretty brutal series in terms of, the intensity. It always is. It was like that in 2017. I expect it to be a good mix of some good quality defensive hockey and maybe a little chaos in there as well. So, but it's a measuring stick for both teams. The Phantoms want to prove that they're, still just as good and they can hang with, basically, like a lot of these teams that won the 3-game series, it wasn't a fluke. It was what they're trying out to prove with the series. And the Bears, kind of have as we kind of talked about with Cleveland, they're kind of coming in after not playing for a week and a half. It was beneficial for the Bears. They were nursing a couple of players with injuries, nagging, related things, as well as waiting for their guys to come back. So they'll take that trade every single day, I think. But I think it's going to be a very challenging series for both teams, but full power, full matchup. It should be some great hockey to watch.
Yeah, it does feel a little bit like towards the end of the regular season, when the Hershey Bears were still winning a bunch of games, it was still very much like, man, they haven't even reached their final form here, because much like Cleveland, they just kept losing guys to their parent team. Capitals made the playoffs and bowed out, not gracefully, but quickly at least. And it's gonna be interesting. So let's take some predictions for Hershey and Lehigh Valley. And Corey, why don't you go first this time?
I'm going to say Hershey in 4. I believe there will be some close games in that sequence there. This is not the Bears run away with it and have one bad game type of thing.
Bears win in 2 games. No.
not exactly that. I think it's going to be, to me, it's going to be a test for the Bears. And, the Bears were able to endure some of Lehigh Valley's style of play. Now, as the beneficiary of watching the Phantoms play the Bears 12 times in the regular season, as well as Wilkes-Barre 12 times in the regular season, the Bears, had times in the regular season where they really had to counter and, hold the fort down. I think the X factor for this series is going to be the goaltending with Hunter Shepard. I think that, Shepard is an elite goaltender. He kind of reminds me of what we were saying earlier about Dustin Wolf, a smaller guy who plays big and very positionally sound. In some of the games where, he and Cal Peterson have matched up directly, the Bears have won 1-goal games because of Hunter Shepard's great play. So I think that's going to be kind of an X factor in reducing that from maybe a 5-game series to a 4. But, I fully expect, as long as Hershey's on, and this break is not detrimental, it's a help and not detriment, I do think you're going to see Hershey flex their muscle and, win a couple of close games, and just that championship experience they had last season will kind of be the X factor as well as the goaltending.
Yeah, for sure. Deana, what do you think about this series?
Can I be bold?
Please, we love bold on this show.
Okay, so this is a best of 5. Hershey takes it in 3.
Very bold.
I mean, they're going to be ready. The amount of 7 players just came back from the Capitals. Good
Asterisk
I
on
believe
that.
one of those. I'm actually just sorry to correct you on your own
I
team,
think we have
Corey.
the same point.
I believe it's 6 because Mitch, what's his name, is going back
Mitch
to the
Gibson.
ECHL.
He'll be an extra goaltender, I believe.
Yeah.
Him and Garen Bjorklund are both up. Now, the South Carolina Stingray season is over. The Bears have a lot of their extras. So it's technically 6, but they threw Mitch Gibson in there because he was up with the Capitals as a third extra practice goalie.
He'll be their
really
third
6.
goalie in case terrible things happen. But I'm going to knock on wood
Exactly.
real quick. I agree with Deana, though. I think Hershey rolls over Lehigh Valley in 3. I think probably those 3 games are close. I wouldn't be surprised if at least 2 of them go to overtime. But in the way that you don't bet against Dustin Wolf, you look at this series and you look at the season that they've had, and I'm like, man, betting on Hershey losing a game feels like a fool's errand a little bit, The
one counterpoint I will say to all of that is that, as the chief most Bears fan as well as the chief most Philadelphia Flyers sufferer in here, the Flyers have a lot of great pieces in Lehigh Valley right now. And I think it's just that, I'd be curious to see if they're able to come together further in this series. So, I mean, to me, I know Bobby Brink, is a player who, in my opinion, is an up-and-comer who should be in Philadelphia full-time next season. He's been really good. And he's one of those shifty players with a great shot. There's a lot of underrated aspects of the Phantoms that I think maybe getting thrown by the wayside a little bit, just kind of paling in comparison to how highly touted Hershey is. They've been a lot of really great games between those two teams. So, I do think, I'm surprised that I'm the one that's picking this series to go the longest out of the.
I know. I fully am like, man, Deana and I have way more not more faith in the Bears, but
I appreciate it.
Corey's just hedging his bets, I think.
We're more willing to vocalize it, but like you were talking about, don't bet on Dustin Wolf, and I'm thinking you don't bet on don't bet against Trey Fix-Wolansky. In this series, do not bet against Todd Nelson.
True. Correct.
Very true.
He could be an NHL coach. Just saying.
Should be.
A lot of vacancies coming up. Seattle just fired their guy.
It's only Dave Haxtell.
I think that's Dan Bowles.
It's only Dave Haxtell. Sorry, we can't get into Dave Haxtell on this podcast. We're already going long. But
it's Dan Bowles' music. Mark my words.
Oh yeah, it's Disco Dan is back, baby. It's gonna be great. Let's move on. Let's talk about the Western Conference because we have a couple of matchups over there to talk about. Before we do that, I have some more to share about our sponsor, Document Doctors. Is your business growing beyond the four walls of your office? As businesses grow, so do the challenges of keeping people trained, safe, and supportive. Document Doctors is a proud sponsor of the Calder's Calling podcast and the Calder Times, and they offer affordable solutions to help optimize your business and keep the good times rolling. They offer content-focused solutions such as training document creation, back office process optimization, policy and procedure development, and much, much more. Support the podcast and the Calder Times by visiting them at documentdoctorsllc.com. And don't forget to mention us when talking to their team of contentologists. Shop and support small businesses today. Once again, that is at documentdoctorsllc.com. Let's talk about the Ontario Reign and the Abbotsford Canucks. Because I think I said earlier that I think Cleveland is the most interesting matchup. I do think Ontario Abbotsford is probably the best the most evenly matched matchup. Abbotsford obviously just fully dunked on Colorado, which you love to see in the first round. Their stars were their stars when they needed them to be. Archie Baines was fantastic for them over the 3-game series. Again, we're going to talk about goaltending because it's my show and I can do what I want. Abbotsford won with their third-string goalie. At the start of the series, they had Artur Silovs, who got called up as a third goalie for the Canucks, for the Vancouver Canucks for their playoff run. Demko gets injured. The second string goalie, who is now the starting goalie for the Abbotsford Canucks, Nikita Tolopilo, gets called up. And so they are forced to go with Zachary Sorchenko for their postseason run. He played 6 games this season. He didn't get action. He didn't get game action until March 6th, I believe. And he was great. He had a .924 save percentage over 3 games, had 47 of 48 saves in that game 3 against Colorado. And it's one of the more fun storylines, I think, happening out in the West at the minute, is that Abbotsford somehow lost both of their top 2 goalies, had to bring in Zach Sorchenko, and he was like, okay, bet. So I think that's going to be really interesting in terms of they've got a very good goaltending matchup. Ontario Stars haven't shown up yet. Like I said, TJ Tynan hasn't really showed up yet. Samuel Fagemo has been snake bit as hell. I believe 11 shots on goal over 2 games and no goals. So you've got to figure out that something's coming for him. Brent Clark, relatively quiet. Leading the way is Tyler Madden with 3 goals and no assists for the Ontario Reign. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be a battle of, can Ontario Stars get going, or can Abbotsford keep up on this improbable Cinderella run that's happening right now with, like I said, the Vancouver Canucks 5th string goaltender is the starter in Abbotsford right now.
I love the storyline, though. I love the Cinderellas that come through here. I don't want any to come through the East. No offense. I'm very biased there. I want to see this for the entire Vancouver organization. The Canucks on both sides. Yes, please. I love this. Sorry, Ontario. Sorry, Jay.
I know I'm really torn in this series because, like, of the teams that are remaining, and like, so I'm covering the Milwaukee Admirals for the postseason run for the Calder Times as well. But the Ontario Reign is my former beat. I am still pretty attached, like, emotionally to a lot of those players. Obviously, if TJ Tynan asked me to commit a crime, I would. Deana, I'm sure you're kind of the same. You miss him in Cleveland.
Very.
I'm so torn because, yes, Abbotsford rising up and winning and making it to the final 8 would be incredible. I don't know if they do it, though. I think Ontario, again, much like Hershey, Ontario didn't even really reach their final form against Bakersfield and still kind of strolled past them. What happens when Samuel Fagemo starts scoring goals? What happens when TJ Tynan shows up and starts just, like, passing the puck to anyone who stands still long enough and bouncing the puck off them into the net? It's gonna be a fascinating series. I think it's gonna be this series goes 5 games, I think. And my preview is going to be coming out, I believe, the day that this podcast goes live. But we're kind of a bit wonky in terms of when we're recording and posting stuff at the minute. But I picked Ontario in 5 in my preview for this series. I am not super confident in that prediction.
Okay, so this is, again, these are all best of 5 series. So Ontario gets 2 games at home. Abbotsford gets 3 games on the road. You know what? I'm going to throw my hat in this Cinderella run for Abbotsford. 4 games.
Interesting. Bold. That's even bolder than your Hershey in 3 take.
Okay, 5.
No, like, I'm about it. I love it. I love it. This is why I've been pushing for bold predictions, basically, anytime we do this stuff. I love
Cinderella.
I love bold predictions. Stick with, if your heart is saying Abbotsford in 4, stick with Abbotsford in 4. I'm here for it. I really am.
Okay.
Corey, how bold are you feeling?
Oh, this is a tough one for me.
Sorry.
I'm doing the finger pyramid of contemplation right now.
How bold are you feeling? Oh.
I think it's going to be Ontario. I just have 2. I love the underrated story of the Abbotsford Canucks and all they're going through, but I still tend to lean on the best of threes being a flash in a pan rather than, sometimes an indicate, it's not enough to read into at different points for me. So like, I feel like Ontario, to me, I just like Ontario's a little bit more in this series. I just think that, as much as you love the Cinderella stories, they're not common for a reason. I think we're going to kind of see that. Maybe it'll go the distance. I think Abbotsford will push. I was very impressed with their Game 3 performance. There was a few times in overtime where they very easily could have just wilted and, died a couple of times there. But I just think that, Ontario is a team that I think is built for these kinds of situations. I think it's going to be them in 5 games.
I respect it. Let's talk about our final matchup, which this one could also get really interesting because it's the guys who were, at January, it was their league to lose in the Texas Stars. And then the Milwaukee Admirals said, hold my beer, I'm going to win 19 games in a row. So it's the up-and-comers versus the guys that were really solid at the start of the season. I thought Texas looked really good. Admittedly against the Manitoba Moose, who I think will probably, Moose fans, apologies, the worst team to make the playoffs with their sub 500 record. So like maybe the Stars winning was, not as super impressive as, other teams sweeping, for example. But Texas looks like they're rolling. Maverick Bourque, reigning league leader in points, reigning MVP. I believe he got forward of the year for the AHL, has 4 points in 2 games. I believe he had all 4 points in that first game, actually, and then was held pointless in the second game. Milwaukee, what do you say about Milwaukee? Just an absolute wagon this season. Came out of nowhere. 19-game winning streak. Second in AHL history for longest win streak. They have arguably the most fun goalie in the league in Yaroslav Askarov, which I'm rooting for a Milwaukee shutout just so we can see him bench press the goal in the playoffs. It's my favorite. It's my favorite. It just is. But how do we feel about this matchup? Because I feel like this is a sneaky good matchup for both teams.
Corey, do you want to go first?
Sure. I don't feel like it's as close as what it's being billed as right now. I feel like this is Milwaukee we're talking about here. Maybe I'm more willing to be bold on Milwaukee compared to like, Hershey, which, you guys obviously took Hershey in 3 games in both of those predictions, but Milwaukee is so good. I just have a hard time, I feel betrayed by Texas in a lot of ways because they were so good and they looked like, like Jay said, that was their division to lose and they lost it. And I'm sure, losing some key players, like obviously Logan Stankoven is up with Dallas and, isn't coming back. There's some factors like that, but I'm like, I feel like it's, I just can't put my trust in them at this point. And, Milwaukee is kind of the opposite where, they maybe started off a little ho-hum, a little average, and then surged up. And then, with the big winning streak, and that's what people will remember from this season, I think in many ways, is how great they were. And not to say that it wasn't for real, but I like the composition of that team a lot more than Texas right now. I'm that's just where I'm sitting at. I would go so far as to say Milwaukee in 4.
Deana, how about you?
So my questions going into this one is, did Milwaukee possibly peak too early in the season? And now Texas coming back on a bit of a resurgence. I'm looking at defenseman Christian Kyrou, rookie defenseman, got 4 points.
Had a great series against Manitoba.
Yeah, amazing series. And Frederick Karlstrom, a center, and Maverick Bourque, he's listed as unavailable right now. So I don't know if he's back with Dallas or what it is. But, he had another 4 points in that series. But also talk about players we don't bet against. I do not bet against Yaroslav Askarov. This one could honestly go either way, but I just keep. Anytime I think about, no offense, Hershey fans, no offense, Milwaukee fans, anytime I see these teams have this unbelievable run, I always think back to the President's Cup curse in the NHL. And there's something to be said about teams that have just kind of coasted, not necessarily, not coasted, but you know what I mean. Things just seem to come
the Hershey Bears
easy
did not
for
have a
them.
particularly difficult, and sorry to dunk on the Hershey Bears for this specifically, but the Hershey Bears did not have a particularly difficult regular season, I don't think. I think they obviously you have to give them credit for having an incredible regular season,
Yes.
but
But
they
I-
started strong and just kept rolling, you know?
But I think Hershey probably had a more difficult time achieving that than what Milwaukee did at the time they did it, because a lot of the Central was struggling then.
That's true. Milwaukee also benefits from the Central being absolute butt cheeks most of the season.
Gosh, I don't know if I can predict this one. I wish I had a quarter and I just do head tails.
Just flip it.
I don't know if you can see the vein in my forehead, but like
I know
really
the
hard
Hershey Bears
time.
guys are going to come after me for this, but I stand by
Honestly,
it.
I am having a really hard time not being like, punching the camera. I'm punching at the camera right now.
I think a lot about the Boston Bruins of last season.
But
these are a better type of bear. These bears are built different.
I think
these bears are built different. Title of this episode.
I think it's going to affect Milwaukee more, though.
Yeah. You think if they come up against a Texas team that doesn't roll over, they're just going to fold, or not fold, but
I think Texas is starting to feel pretty good about themselves again. This one is the hardest one for me. I'm going to go with Texas in 5. I'm going with the underdogs out in both of my Western Conference picks today.
Yeah, something I want to just real quick look at before I make my prediction. So the Dallas Stars could be done in the playoffs as early as Wednesday. They're currently down 2-1 to the Vegas Golden Knights. They play, I think, tonight, and then they play Monday, which is when we're recording this. Then they play Game 5 on Wednesday. If they lose both of those games, their season is over. That means Texas probably gets Logan Stankoven back. And that feels like...
I feel much better about this now.
To me. I'm going to go Milwaukee in 5, I think. But I think whoever comes out of this series is going to be just in pieces. And I think it's going to be, whoever it is, whether it's Milwaukee or Texas, is going to face the winner of Grand Rapids versus Rockford. And I think whoever comes out of the Milwaukee-Texas series is going to be more beat up and is going to be more exhausted. They're going to have played harder, faster hockey than whoever comes out of the Grand Rapids-Rockford series. So that's going to be really interesting, I think. But I do think Milwaukee takes it in 5. But Texas really, really makes them work for it, I think.
All fair points.
Formal apology once again to the Hershey Bears and all of their fans. Please don't come for me. I know that you are Legion.
And it's like, it's not that we're necessarily dunking on them. It's just, like I said,
set the bar so high. I mean,
that's kind of the thing. And like you look at the Bears, and they didn't. What was it? They didn't lose back-to-back games all season.
They did not in regulation.
What happens if Lehigh Valley gets an early lead in the series? What happens if Lehigh Valley goes up 2-0 in that series? We don't know how the Bears are going to respond because we don't know how they respond to losing back-to-back games because they haven't done it. And so it's
maybe they just won't. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe they just won't. And like I said, Hershey in 3. This is not me saying that Lehigh Valley is going to come out and just destroy the Bears. I think, but I am always wary of teams that are so good in the regular season. The Tampa Bay Lightning in 2019 is another one. If you will allow me one more homer moment before we finish up here, of Tampa Bay Lightning winning the President's Trophy, getting Columbus, the 8th seed, in that particular matchup and then getting swept because they lost game one and then didn't really know how to recover from that. So I don't think Hershey is the same. I think Hershey is a different story. I think this team is too good for that. But it is going to be in the back of my mind basically the entire series with Lehigh Valley.
I will maintain that I think, again, Hershey will navigate it better than Milwaukee.
Yeah.
Just because of the level of competition that they have faced this season.
So those are all the matchups that we're going to preview. If you are missing a matchup, then TAPS, the AHL Pre-Show, will be previewing the other 4 series when they launch on Friday. So that will be, if I can pull up my list that I do not have open. So again, a square on the bingo card is Jay doesn't have the tabs that he needs open. So if you would like some information on Providence, Hartford, Rochester, Syracuse, Coachella Valley, Calgary, and Grand Rapids, Rockford, head on over to TAPS, which is going live on Friday morning. And then we will be back with you early next week for some looks ahead at how, or some looks behind, I guess, at how the series have started off. Who's looking good? Who's looking bad? Have Hershey fallen into a pit and lost in 3 games to Lehigh Valley?
Don't even put that out there. No. No.
I'm gonna knock on wood. It's fine. Corey's so mad at me. I can tell that he's like pretending he thinks it's funny, but Corey's so mad at me right now.
Vein in my forehead.
That's going to do
right
it for this week's edition of Calder's Calling. If you want to check out our written coverage of the AHL, we have previews for every round 2 series coming up on thecaldertimes.com. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, all at The Calder Times. If you haven't already, go ahead and hit subscribe on YouTube or your favorite podcasting app. Leave us a like, leave us a comment. Don't forget to tell your friends where they can find all the AHL hockey chatter their hearts desire. Finally, we'd like to extend a final thank you to our sponsor, Document Doctors. Until next week, I've been Jay Foster. That's been Deana Weinheimer. That's been Corey Swartz. We have been Calder's Calling. Enjoy some playoff hockey, guys.